Hello and welcome to our series of The Recipients, where we are interviewing the recipients of the 2022 National Awards for Disability Leadership. And it's my enormous pleasure today to be speaking with Vicki-Anh Winfield and Martin Raffaele, who are both members of the University of Sydney's Disability at Work Network, or DAWN, steering committee. The Disability at Work Network is a staff network at the University of Sydney. The network is led by a voluntary steering committee comprised of staff with lived experience of disability. Their mission is to build community and lead change on disability issues at the university. In 2022, they pioneered multiple programs and initiatives to build awareness and to improve ease of access at the University of Sydney. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Innovation Award, which is what the Dawn Network Tautology Moment have received. The Innovation Award is for achieving outcomes to the status of disabled people by working outside the box, developing new systems, technology, or tools. So the fabulous Dawn folk have been doing a bunch of stuff behind the scenes at the University of Sydney to make it a far more accessible place for all. And that's exciting. So welcome, Vicki and Martin. It's great to be talking to you today.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you very much
for having us.
Okay, so how did you get into this work? Why did you think it was necessary for Dawn to be a thing? Vicki?
For me, I grew up in a very small town and my disability is from birth. So there was just never anyone who was like me around me. So when I moved to Sydney and became a staff member at the university, it was just suddenly there were other people who were like me and having similar experiences to me. And so Dawn actually existed before I came along. So it was very nice to be able to walk into that network and find those other people. And I think we've just elevated it over the past year in terms of our membership and the types of events and activities that we've been working on. It's just growing and growing.
Fantastic. Martin, why is Dawn a thing? Why does it need to be there?
Well, for myself, I know that studying 4 degrees at the university, personally, I got a lot of support as a student because there was a disability for students. And even when I was doing my 2 postgraduate research degrees, there was special computer programs brought in that could turn my spoken words into writing and also read to me what was on the screen. So they were very important after the 2 brain surgery operations I had. And I felt it doesn't just stop when you graduate. There needs to be that there also for staff members. And that's why I thought I was drawn very closely to Dawn, thinking there needs to start being more acceptance of people with a disability.
Fantastic. And we have been hearing a lot about this at the Disability Leadership Institute, that academia generally, that universities in Australia generally need to be doing a lot more work around disability, particularly for academia, for the staff, not just the academic staff, but also for the administrative staff, that there needs to be some work done. And so what work are you currently engaged in at the University of Sydney around getting it more accessible, around supporting staff and around people generally, finding the university a better place to be if they're disabled? Martin?
Well, I personally teach, or actually, how to better say it, I better educate people who are studying first-year physiotherapy and also Master of Rehabilitation Counselling about the day-to-day aspects of living with epilepsy, which I've had 2 brain surgery operations. I give them a greater understanding of not only what is a seizure, but how does it affect day-to-day life. And what it's actually done is seen the students become far more accepting of disability. And they're losing their fear towards their possible future patients who might have the condition. So by introducing the first-person perspective, it really is changing how students are accepting it.
Do you think there's something
so I think
about
that is an important thing.
Absolutely. Vicki, do you think there's something about being openly disabled as an academic that's actually important for students and for other staff?
Oh, definitely. I think there's sort of two ways that it's really important. It's firstly important for students who have disabilities who might not have thought that they could pursue academia as a possible career path. And I know Martin's been a really great mentor in our mentoring program, and actually, mentoring some PhD candidates who want to pursue academia as a career. But I think it's also really important for students who don't have a disability to get that experience as well. And it just kind of is a good way of making sure that they don't develop any biases, that career path isn't for people with disabilities.
Yeah. And so what is the network specifically focused on right now, Vicky? What's it doing today?
At the moment, we're planning for 2023. So some of the projects that we worked on last year that we want to roll over again are definitely our mentoring program. So that one, we got a lot of positive feedback where we were pairing people who have disabilities at the university with people who have newly acquired a disability or have newly come to our university. And it's a way for people who are joining this large organization to not feel like they're the only person with a disability. So they have this point of contact who sits outside of their team and outside of their management, who they can turn to and say, how do I get a workplace adjustment? How do I have this conversation with my manager? What are some techniques and strategies that you have used? And I think that having that mentor sit inside your organization is also really helpful, because obviously every organization is different and has their own ways of doing things. So having someone who has that lived experience, not just of disability, but that lived experience of how to have a disability in your organization is really, really helpful.
And so, Martin, you've been doing some mentoring. How have
Yes.
you found that process, and what are some of the ways that you've seen that address some of the barriers that those people that you've mentored have been encountering?
Well, the difficulty so often is the fear of being recognized for having a condition as such. And so being able to speak to somebody who also has a disability and is living comfortably with it, it makes it a so much easier situation to deal with. You're not worrying, a lot of time they're not worrying about how are their staff going to, or fellow colleagues going to judge them. They know that they have qualifications because they've reached that level, and they should be recognized for that and not for the disability or something that so often is thought of as a negative. Instead, it should be the positive thing because they've got knowledge that a lot of people don't have.
Yes. So what are some of the barriers or roadblocks that you've encountered as a network? What has Dawn come across that's made it difficult, or that you've had to sort of encounter? Was there skepticism about having a network at all, or has it been well received, Vicky? What do you think? What did you have to address internally to be able to even have a network in the first place?
I think so for context, our network has been around since 2014, but so it's been there for a little bit, and I think it's sort of shifted from its initial position by being developed and proposed by the DAP to now being a fully kind of network, like a network which is independently led by people with disabilities, which is really exciting. And I think probably the roadblocks and things that we're facing now are quite different to what we would have faced when we were setting up the network. So I think our main roadblocks at the moment are just people. No one thinks it's their job to be inclusive. Everybody thinks that it's another person's job or another team, particularly in an organization like ours where it is so large. So that's one of our biggest challenges, is making people understand that everybody has the right to be included, but you also individually have the responsibility to include everyone else as well.
That's a fascinating one, isn't it? What roadblocks have you noticed, Martin? What are some of the things that people find, as Vicky's saying, not their responsibility, or that they might even decide they actively don't support? What have you seen?
Well, I can see that often it does when you get to the academic level. There is a set almost idea on what a perfect staff member is. sorry. So so it can be difficult to it can affect the individual's subjective well-being or how they perceive themselves. And that's where a lot of the time, I guess for myself, because I studied a PhD that was based on men who have brain surgery for epilepsy, and how difficult it is to pick yourself up after doing that and get on with a lot of time a new life, because you're losing the job that you used to have and you're needing to learn how to create a new foundation to build your world. And so there needs to be that ability to be confident with your disability and not to feel like it's being judged as incapable or as such.
Yes, it's interesting how it doesn't seem to matter what field we're talking about, and this, today we're talking
Of
about
course, yes.
academia. But some of these issues are almost the constant conversations that we have at the DLI around, being out there and just doing our work, getting on with things. It's fascinating, isn't it? So what do you think Dawn receiving this award will do for the work of the network? How will it assist or not assist? Will anybody notice? I hope they do, because it's quite important. So what do you think it will do to change the work of the network or contribute to it, Martin, to receive this award?
Well, for myself, I think that with what I have been doing with those two class groups, I think by receiving this award, it's going to open the university's eyes more to widening the perspective on who are the people that need to learn about the day-to-day aspects of living with disability before they actually get into the workforce. So that their understanding, for example, whether it's a psychologist or a school teacher, what happens if a child suddenly has a seizure? What do you do? How do you act? If you're getting those understandings from a first-person perspective, you can then reflect back and go, hang on, what did Martin say that happens at this point? And be more relaxed about it rather than so scared, because it's often a topic that is not discussed.
And Vicki,
disabilities.
It's not disabilities, it's anathema. It's a thing. Vicki, you were referring to the fact that nobody's responsible for inclusion, or people think, it's somebody else's job. So how do you think this award might assist in that particular battle?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, actually, because we've already seen the largest, we've been steadily growing our network over the past year, but once we won the award, we just saw a huge uptick in the number of people at the university who wanted to know what Dawn was and hear what we're doing. So one of the strategies that we're working on at the moment is creating a number of workshops to kind of broaden people's perspectives on what disability is and explain, some of the ways that you can be more inclusive in your workplace. So one of the ones we've done already is how to do accessible meetings. And then Martin's also presenting our next one, which is some of the work that he's been doing to embed his lived experience into the curriculum. So that's really exciting to see that people are actually interested in what we're doing. So very excited.
Excellent. We would hope it raises the profile of the network. It's we're starting to see a lot more of these, a lot of employee networks, but across all sorts of domains, government, corporate, academia. But whether they're actually affecting change or whether they're accepted by the organisations that they sit in is always the challenge, it seems. Vicki, they tend to be often running on a shoestring by volunteers, which can make it very challenging to operate at the same level as some of the senior staff at the university, of course, who might be have a myriad of projects that they think are very important, and they all are, but they're also well paid and they have staff to help them to get to things like, manage their diaries. So you're kind of operating in an unsupported space. Do you find that to be something that, what do you think the future is for these sorts of networks? Do they need to be more formalised, or is it important that they do remain voluntary and driven by the grassroots?
The way that we've structured our Dawn network is, like I said, it was originally set up by the DAP, but it's now completely, and that was like 2014, so quite a few years ago now.
Tell us what the DAP is.
Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which is, yes, so the one that, every business has to lead their disability strategy. So that was one of their initiatives back then. But so we've since kind of moved away from, I guess, being managed by the DAP. We still work really, really closely with them and partner with them on a lot of different projects. But in terms of our network governance, we are independently led by myself and Charles, who are our co-chairs, and people like Martin, who are on our amazing steering committee. But I think in terms of getting the university to still, I guess, participate in what we're doing, the way that we've structured it is we actually have an executive sponsor who is our Vice Principal of Operations, and he's been incredibly supportive of our network and the kinds of initiatives that we want to run. So that might be a possible avenue for, networks that are being set up in other organizations, is to just get you only really need one person to believe in you to start with. You just need that one champion, and then they'll find a couple of other champions for you, and they'll find a few more champions. And I think that's how we've kind of grown and got a lot of respect and integrity from the university.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. It's do you think that's what's next, is some of that work around, you're talking about continuing some of the programs you developed last year, and of course, we're all back on campus now instead of all the remote stuff. What's next for the network? Is it about continuing that growth and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to enjoy their University of Sydney experience, or is it actually finding more champions? What do you think is the big next step, Vicki?
Growth is definitely part of it, but one of the things that we're also looking at and focusing on this year are increasing the number of social events that we have for people with disabilities. So we've done a lot of workshops and educating and disability themed events, but I think one of the most powerful things is just to meet casually with other people who have disabilities, and that's the thing that really gives you confidence in your workplace. And then the other thing we're working on is expanding our number of positive self-identity activities and training modules for people who have lived experience of disability. So we did a couple of those last year in terms of creating accessible goals, and we have a writing activity on how to talk about your disability for different contexts. So for your manager versus your friend. And so I know that's really similar to some of the work that Martin's been doing that he touched on earlier. So that's probably what 2023 looks like for us.
Wow, fantastic. It's the vibrancy of these networks in some ways that is actually creating a space where that confidence can emerge, isn't it, Martin? Is that what you'd suggest?
Being a part of it is just an exciting thing. And that's what, for myself, I guess my main focus is, if I can use my condition in a positive way to help people, then I am doing the right thing. And that's why being a part of things like this push me forward. They get me up each day and they get me into the university, because I'm wanting to make sure that for that next generation and so on, it's going to be a much more accepting and inclusive environment.
Yeah, fantastic. We're pretty much out of time today, but I always have a question that I ask everyone. It doesn't matter what the podcast's about and what we're talking about. I always have a final question, and I'll start with you, Martin. So who is a leader that you admire and why?
At the moment, it would be a course that I'm actually doing personally at the moment is inclusive. It's a part of the Incubate Hub at the Sydney University, and that's for developing businesses.
Yes.
And David, the man who runs that, he personally has experienced neurological disability. And so he believes in me in a way where he sees that the way I'm educating Sydney University could be taken to a wider aspect, and looking at other universities and also even the workplace, so that people aren't scared of disability based on just what they don't know. If they can get that knowledge, then they can start accepting and living with it. And so by having someone who believes like that, it's just a very positive thing for me.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. And what about you, Vicky? Who's a leader that you admire and why?
I think it's such an interesting question because I've always kind of felt like a bit of an outsider in terms of my disability. So there's no one person who I can like look up to and say, yes, that person is doing all the things I'm doing or has had all of the same challenges that I've had. So it's more, I think my sort of person that I look up to is more like a patchwork of different people who have had different experiences. And I think with the stuff that I'm doing with Dawn, the people that I kind of look up to the most are just anyone who steps forward and shares their story and talks about their disability. So people like Martin and other members within our network are sort of, that's what leadership is for me, is people who are talking about disability and sharing their experiences.
Oh, fantastic. It's a diverse thing. And I think, I mean, the reason I love that question particularly is just how far it takes us into different spaces. You know, there's no one definition or style of leadership. And I think that's important, particularly as disabled people, for us to be able to look at. Yeah. Vicki-Anh Winfield and Martin Raffaele from the University of Sydney Disability at Work Network, thanks so much for talking to us, and congratulations once again on being the 2022 recipients of the National Awards for Disability Leadership Innovation Award.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
It has been wonderful, yes.